Hey there, everyone. Welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, still doing this intro manually in a way that really is kind of, just a discordance, because I have to do this flashy, like, hey, MC guy, and then get into whatever we're talking about. And oftentimes those things don't link up very well. But the thing is that I have to just accept it, right? Because as I've told you before, life for me is extraordinarily busy, and there's only so many hours of the day, right? There's only so long that we have that we can commit to any given task, and so this, brings me to a really lovely point that I enjoy talking about a lot. So I'm going to bring it up with you right now. Something that I tell every single client I work with at some point. I use Jon Kabat-Zinn's quote for this because I think it's just, I'm a big fan of Jon Kabat-Zinn, and this quote is really, really special. So what Jon Kabat-Zinn says is that he says, life is the curriculum. And the thing I really love about that is that he's not saying life is the teacher, because I think that's really accurate. I think that the teacher is the practice. Right? The teacher is mindfulness and compassion and self-compassion, right? Which, I really don't draw the distinction between compassion and self-compassion. To me, it's compassion. It's either compassion for everyone, or you're really not truly compassionate. But we'll get into that in actually, maybe I'll get into that to this segment because we have to fill something in here, but I'll tell you about that in a second. But anyway, when Jon Kabat-Zinn says life is the curriculum, right? What I believe he's saying is that the practice is the teacher. And then the curriculum is the way in which the teaching can be sort of foundationally sort of embodied, if you will, right? And what this means is, and the reason I bring this up is because right now was an opportunity. Right now is a way in which life is serving me up an opportunity to apply the teaching, the learning that I've done, and apply it to the curriculum, to see it in action, and that's how we can embody it, right? And so it's a very, and oftentimes, and this is the thing, right? And this is really a big life lesson here too, right? That oftentimes, we think of life as something that's very complicated, which, of course, there's so much complexity to life, right? Anytime you take a ball of a living planet like we're living on, right? And you put 7.6 billion people on it, yes, there's going to be complexity. Yes, absolutely, right? And of course, no, it doesn't require all 7.6 billion people, pardon me, even just within the city of Denver, there's a lot of people here, 2-3 million people, something like that. There's going to be complexity in the interactions, right? There's going to be, life out there that you have to interact with. And the more sort of stuff going on, the more complex it feels, right? But at its core, at its essence, life is actually really simple. Or it's much more simple than we tend to make it, right? And the reason I bring that up is something we talked about just the other day, is that, the comment that life is the curriculum is very simple. And the lessons that we can, the way in which we apply the learning to the curriculum of life is also very, very simple, right? But don't ever mistake simple for ineffective. Like I said yesterday, hey, if I said I'll give you $100 if you can sing the chorus to 5 different Elvis Presley songs, right? You'd be able to bang those out like that. And guess what? Every one of Elvis Presley's songs contained 3 chords. It's the most simple, basic form of music that there's ever been invented. Maybe Mary Had a Little Lamb is a little bit more basic, but not much, right? It's a little bit more simple, but not much. And so the idea is that life is always providing us these opportunities for learning, the opportunities to apply the learning that we've experienced in very simple ways. And that's kind of important to recognize, because it's in the simplicity that the beauty lies. But also though the real reason why it's important to sort of acknowledge this that we're that the lessons and the examples and the opportunities are going to look very simple. Now we can look for the simple, right? If we sort of set that intention, right? Because otherwise, if we're constantly thinking that lessons have to come in the form of, very fancy and highly edited, books, well, then that belies the reality of the situation. And so the reason I bring this up is because just right now, right? Like, I have the opportunity right now to do one of two things when it comes to my the intro for this podcast and YouTube channel, right? I have actually three choices, right? I could force myself to turn my life around and just spend as much time as I have to just get it done, right? And in that scenario, other areas of my life are likely to suffer, right? Because I'm have this rigid, clinging to the idea that I have to get this done. So what am I not doing, right? Like there's a reason I'm not able to do it because of other things that are going on. So if I reprioritize things, well, who loses, right? Like who gets the short end of that stick? And that might not be beneficial. It might be. Right? Like, so for instance, if recording the intro would mean an increase in income, which then I could use to take my family on a vacation that would change their lives, well, then that's a worthy reprioritization, right? But reprioritization, pardon me. But if recording the intro means that, I don't get to take my son on our daily walk, which is an opportunity for growth and connection between he and I, well, then I have to weigh that a little more carefully. Is that really worth it? Because, the reality is I haven't gotten a lot of complaints from anybody who's listening to my podcast. Like, I haven't received messages saying, oh, man, if only you had a good intro, I'd listen to your stuff, but forget it, right? So again, it gives the idea, the opportunity to see what really is there. And that is life being the curriculum. Life is also being the curriculum in which now, okay, so I said I had three choices, right? So life is the curriculum in getting me to really look at, right? Like, what is really the priority here, right? Like, is it a priority to postpone the joy with your family in order to get this thing done? That's a question. Again, but that's the way in life is the curriculum, right? It's making you do this thing, right? Here's this book you have to read. Here's this paper you have to read. Here's this lesson you have to go through, right? Because here's an opportunity now that makes me look without delusion, but with non-judging awareness at what's happening, right? And so the second way in which life, or the second choice that I have there, right? So I could either postpone something else, and I can do the intro, right, and let whatever happens, like, make that decision, right? And the other thing I can do is I can resist the reality, right? I can sit here and say, oh, it's so annoying that I can't do this stupid intro, and darn it, I want to have the time, and it's those darn kids that take so much of my time, and my wife didn't take out the garbage yesterday, and now I'm all annoyed. That's my second choice, right? It's not a beneficial choice, but that's the choice that I have. And then the third choice I have is I can accept it, right? I can accept it for now. Right? It doesn't mean acceptance in this context does not mean forever acceptance, right? It doesn't mean that I'm never going to do the intro and I'm just going to let it sit there and it's whatever. Like, I don't care, right? That's not what we're talking about when we're talking about acceptance. It's not apathy. It's acceptance of reality. And the reason why we accept reality, because remember the choice, the second choice, if I reject reality, if I resist reality, if I deny reality, that's going to cause suffering in me. That's going to cause a nervous system reaction that is going to increase, it's emotional and nervous system reaction. The emotions come first, they trigger the nervous system. Either way, I'm going to be in a place where not only am I not going to be able to record the intro or even wrap my head around it, but also, in all likelihood, when I go out for my walk with my son, I'm not going to be right. I'm not going to be showing up to my life. I'm going to be caught in all this emotion and turmoil. And who benefits from that? Right? And so that's the way in which this little tiny thing, it's little and it's also big, I guess. It's an intro, it's important. Speaking of big, by the way, this is the 600th episode today, which is really big. But again, it's a very tiny thing in my life. This is not something that's going to, it's not a life or death situation. It's not something that is going to, on face value, it's not going to change that much in my life, right? But you can see, as I just applied, like, let's say that second choice, right? And I decide I'm not going to accept. I'm just going to get frustrated. I'm going to get angry. I'm going to get all, triggered and hyper aroused in my emotions and my stress response, right? And then let's say I go out with my son and my son asks me a question about sex or something. These are the conversations I have all the time with my 10-year-old son. And it's pretty amazing, right? But in that moment, he's asking me something that's a really important question for him, right? And my answer could mean the difference between him being a healthy and functional human being sexually, or somebody who gets some hangups. And truly, from your dad for a son, like, one word could change everything in that situation. And I mean that. That's not exaggeration, right? Like the way that my father handled these things, I was a mess with this stuff. It took me forever to figure it out on my own. And there's a lot of suffering there. And I don't want my son to experience that suffering. So I can then, again, so this little thing, right? This little thing about whether or not to accept the fact for now that I have this, recording of an intro that I haven't done, right? It seems so innocuous, so simple, so almost silly, because it doesn't really impact life that much, right? But you can see how if we connect the dots a little bit, we can get to a point where we see that it could impact not only my son, but his son and his son's son. And they say, there's not science behind it, but they say like 7 generations are affected by the actions that we have as parents. Again, that's not a scientific number or anything. I don't even know what it's based on, but it's a fascinating thought, though, and I certainly believe there's some truth to it, because it does impact, right? Like, it doesn't stop with us, and it didn't start with us, right? We are within the context of a larger system of the family and the ancestry, right? So I absolutely believe that is going to, impact somewhat, not only my son, but how he handles it with his kids, if he decides to have kids. If there's still, anyway. But, and so this is where, this is where, again, getting back to what I was saying before, kind of, setting the intention that, that I can look for the little things. I can look for little opportunities in which to practice my compassion and my mindfulness. And so, yeah. And so that's where we get into, well, I'm sorry, I need to finish my thought. I'm very sorry about that. I don't know. I just got wrapped up sometimes I get just the idea of compassion. It just makes me pause for a moment and just think about how, or just not think about, but just feel how important that is and how big that is. Right. Yeah. That's beautiful. and that's the thing, right? And just like this was a little tiny example of an opportunity for me to practice or to apply my understanding of mindfulness and acceptance, right? So and these opportunities arise all the time if we're looking for them, right? And another opportunity that arises all the time is the opportunity to practice kindness and compassion, right? And again, this is on very, very small levels. We might think of, compassion, we think of people suffering, right? Because that's the thing, right? And that's one thing that we will be covering in the self-compassion course that starts in 2 days that I'm so excited about. Compassion, unlike kindness, compassion requires a level of suffering in order to be applied. And compassion is all about suffering. It comes from the Latin. You've heard me say this before. The word compassion comes from the Latin compare, which means to suffer with. So when people think of human suffering, most people, I think, is certainly me, my mind goes to, starving children in developing countries, or war-torn regions where you see this horrible stuff on the news or wherever you're getting your information, that you see these, horrible pictures and, you think of war and you think of starvation, you think of, storms and tidal waves and all this kind of stuff, right? And that's what we think of when we think, again, I think we tend to go to that place when we think of suffering, right? But suffering is also, the kid who works for $10 an hour who's got to return all the shopping carts in the parking lot in a cold and rainy night. Right? So it is an act of compassion. It also happens to be an act of kindness, but it's an act of compassion for me to walk the cart back to the store, even though it's raining, right? Because because it is a form of suffering for that, 18-year-old kid to walk all over this parking lot in the rain and cold to get all these carts where I could just do it, right? And I could relieve his suffering or her suffering. Right? Suffering can also be in, somebody's late for an appointment, letting him in traffic. That can be a practice of compassion, an act of compassion. That's the word that I was looking for, right? And of course, that's the beautiful thing about kindness and compassion, because we can be practicing both, and it is beneficial for us to practice both because, well, I'll give you the reason why is that, as I don't know if you remember this, but about 2 or 3 months ago, I was in a conversation, a live one-on-one conversation with Dan Siegel. And Dan Siegel's, his Mindsight Institute, they have a quote on the wall at his Mindsight Institute that says, integration made visible is kindness and compassion. What he's meaning is that when your brain is integrated, right, from bilaterally and vertically, right, when your brain is in a place of integration, then kindness and compassion automatically arise, right? And so the question I asked to Dan, he told me to call him Dan. I started with Dr. Siegel, but he said, no, please call me Dan. I think doctors love that. But anyway, I think they should too. I mean, they did a lot of work to become a doctor. They deserve that. But my question to him was, okay, so if integration produces kindness and compassion, is it not true that practicing kindness and compassion will create and promote integration? And he said, that is a great question. And he said, yes, absolutely yes. It is a cyclical kind of thing. Right. And that brings me back to, well, let me keep going for a second. So the idea then is that by doing these little acts of kindness and compassion, and kindness is even easier, right? Like kindness doesn't require suffering. So kindness is just all day, every day. Hey, let me hold the door for you. Hey, I hope you have a great day. Hey, you look really nice today. Hey, I love that. I love the little sweater you have on your dog. That's the cutest thing I've ever seen. Hey, can I help you, can I return that cart for you? These are all ways in which you can practice kindness, and these are all over the place. I mean, that is something you could do all the time. And that is where, the idea of this small scale is so important, right? Because these little acts, these little tiny acts that I just named, and there's millions more, each one of those is improving the health of your brain. I mean, this is serious. This is really serious, right? I mean, what an opportunity that all day long I could be out there just doing things for people that make me feel good, make them feel good, and it's also creating integration in my brain. And guess what? The more brain integration we have, the more we're going to become into the present. Now, the other thing that trains, that promotes and creates integration in the brain is attention training, right? And that's another question I asked Dan, is that, so I have clients who kind of shy away from the kindness and the compassion. Where in the next segment, I'm going to talk a lot about that, because we have a worldview, right? We have this worldview that, for a lot of people, for myself, and again, spoiler alert, it's going to come up in the next segment, but for myself, I grew up in New York City. I was thinking about this just last night, that, I was thinking about it in the context of my mother and how overwhelmed she was, and how, she was taking that overwhelm out on me. And part of this is seeing how, it's not just her fault kind of thing, right? Or trying to see the reason why that happened, right? And part of the reason why, not only did it come from her parents, but also growing up in New York City, there's no compassion, there's no helpfulness. I mean, there is sometimes, with your neighbors and stuff, hey, got a cup of sugar kind of thing. But for the most part, it's no, we all got to take care of ourselves. This is a tough town. And so the point is that she didn't have any support system, right? And so I was thinking about that last night, that's the worldview in which, I grew up, and many other people grew up too. And so the idea, when you grow up in that context, that, no, you got to watch out. People are looking to get over on you. People are looking to hurt you. Well, that really hampers and hinders the ability to be kind. Because kindness then is seen as a vulnerability in the not healthy sense, right? It's a weakness. It's an invitation for people to take advantage of you. And so therefore, when I get into work with a lot of people in my coaching, a lot of times they don't believe in the kindness or the compassion. Okay, but what they do believe in is the attention training, right? Because that's beneficial no matter what, right? No matter what your job is, no matter what your role is in life, if you can train your brain to be more attentive and more aware of where your attention is, that's going to benefit you in every area. So that's how I pitch it. And I get them to do the attention training, and then guess what? A few weeks later, the kindness is flowing from them. And so I confirmed this with Dan. I said, is there a neurological basis? And he looked at me almost like, are you really asking me this question? He says, it's integration. Because attention training also promotes integration. And when you're integrated, remember, integration made visible is kindness and compassion. So look for those little opportunities, everyone. The little opportunities for compassion for you and for others, and look for those little opportunities to come into the present moment, accept and let go, and see things for what they really are. These are very valid practices, and they're going to take you a long way, even if they're these little tiny things, I promise you. And even the better, right? Because the tinier things, they're easy, right? You just knock them out all day long. You don't get tired from it. So look for those little tiny examples, okay? If you want to know more about this kind of stuff, okay, we're going to cover a lot of this in the self-compassion course that I'm starting on Saturday. So I've got like 6 people signed up. We're really excited. I mean, there's plenty of room. It's okay. I mean, this is not like a FOMO kind of thing or an ICYMI. My wife would be so proud of me right now. Fear of missing out, or in case you missed it, right? It's nothing like that. But I just want you to benefit from this if you're interested. Okay, so there's plenty of room. So the link will be in the description. All right, everybody, I'll see you in the next segment. All right, welcome back. Segment number 2 for today, the 600th episode. Oh my gosh. I honestly never thought this would go on this long, and I thank you all for making this possible, right? Because if there wasn't people listening and opening these files and stuff, I just wouldn't be doing it, right? And so it's very, very real that you are the reason this has happened, and I really appreciate you for it. So, hey, congratulations to all of us then, right? And of course, the 600 is a sort of misnomer a little bit because I did probably, 50 episodes or so before I even started numbering them. So, but anyway, we'll call it 600. It's a milestone. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm just, again, so grateful for all of you. But so welcome back. Now that last segment went really, really long. I did not have my timer set up, so it went 25 minutes. So it's supposed to be 15. So this I don't think I'm going to get done in 5 minutes here. So y'all are just going to have to take a little extra art today, and I hope you're all right with that. So in the last segment, I referred to the concept of the worldview. Right now our worldview is, kind of like our programming, right? A lot of childhood psychologists and researchers of childhood psychology and development and everything else, they'll use that word programming, right? And I think it's synonymous or substitutable with worldview, right? And it's so basically in the first 8 years of life, again according to development specialists and researchers, it's determined that 7 or 8 years of life, the first 7 or 8 years of life, is when we're soaking up what's happening around us, right, like a sponge, right? And what we're doing is we're seeing how the people who are our role models, our caregivers, our teachers, our coaches, our friends, parents, and aunts and uncles and grandparents and all that kind of stuff. We're watching all of them and seeing how they interact with life. And what we're doing then is we're cataloging that in our brains as this is the way we're supposed to interact with life, right? Like this is the right way to do it. Okay, so that's happening way in the background. No 7-year-old kid knows that this is going on, right? We can barely, grasp these concepts as adults, so it's not something that anybody knows is happening. And this is important for all you parents out there, because if you can be aware of that as a parent, that is a huge step, right, for your children, right? But we'll get into that another time. The important thing to remember, though, right, is that this worldview, whatever it is that you attained during those 7 or 8 years, right? That is what's going to be your worldview until you change it, right? And what that means is that every single experience you have, right? Dan Siegel defines experience as the information and energy flow in between two people and within people, right? So your experience, right? How you experience emotions, how you experience thoughts about the world around you, how you experience interpersonal relationships, okay, are all going to be based and rooted or sort of filtered, maybe is the right word, by this worldview or by this programming. And so what that means, right, in a very simple term, right, like, and it's a very simple concept, right? This is not, it seems complex because it's the brain, right? But it's very, very simple, right? So for instance, I grew up in New York City, right? In New York City, by the time I was, I'm going to say 7 years old, I had already been mugged a couple of times, right? I already had 2 bicycles stolen from me and a Nerf football, I remember. So it was 3 times that I was robbed, face to face, taking my stuff, where 2 or 3 other kids who were bigger than me, older than me, said, give me your bike or else I'm going to beat you up. So I gave him my bike, and so that's something that you experience in a place like New York City, right? You also experience, because your parents grew up in New York City, so and their parents grew up in New York City, so there's this teaching that you got to watch out for people, right? They're all out there trying to get you. They're all out there trying to steal your bike. They're all out there trying to, whatever, right? Steal your football, steal your whatever, right? Of course, now we get into sort of, racial issues or racism issues with this, right? Like, so for me, what was it, 1977, when the Iranian, revolution happened, and they took the U.S. Embassy and took the hostages there, right? That was 1977, so I was 8 years old when that happened. And my mother, right, like as soon as it happened, my mother forbid me from going into this candy store that was run by a Sikh individual who wore a turban, right? And it's the way in which it happened. I'm not going to tell you exactly how it was, because it's ugly and horrible and just terrible. But it was like those people kind of thing, like really, really ugly. I mean, of course, I went to the store. They had video games in there, so I wasn't going to stop. Like, I already had an idea that my mother was, not right with a lot of this stuff. But anyway, that's a much deeper and more traumatizing story. So we'll save that for another day. But the reality is, though, that is something that can steep into somebody's worldview. Right. And of course, this is just one simple example. I mean, I was told to fear, what we used to call bums, which are people who are unhoused, living on the streets in New York City. Can there be any harder and more brutal existence? I mean, if any of you have ever been to New York City in the wintertime, think about somebody living in a box in that weather, right? And so I was taught that I had to fear these people. They're dirty. You're going to get sick. You're going to, of course, none of that's true. And later on in my life, thankfully, I was able to, reject some of this worldview. And I used to let them in my building, let them sleep under the stairs. My landlord would have thrown me out if he found out I was doing that, but screw it. I'm not going to leave this guy out there. It's like 10 below. He's going to freeze to death. It's Merlin. He's he's been here he poses no harm. I know him. I see him every single day. He's another human being, right? And so this is, and fortunately, I was lucky enough to have discovered that lesson with Merlin. I mean, that's a true story. When I was about 24, 25 years old, But the thing is that, again, I was lucky for that, and I don't even know why it is that happened, right? But for a lot of people, that awareness doesn't happen, right? For a lot of people, it's just, you just automatically do it, right? And that's the worldview, right? So I was actually I'm taking a course with Dr. Gabor Mate on trauma. It's called The Wisdom of Trauma. It's sort of an offshoot of a film that he just was involved with called The Wisdom of Trauma. Amazing. I mean, look it up, and they show it from time to time. They release it for a weekend or whatever. Really check out. And if you're really interested in this stuff, I mean, there's also a package that you can buy for this, which I bought because I invested in myself, and I invested in you because this helps me to convey more information. It's a few $100, not extremely expensive. But anyway, part of this thing, you can buy it, and it's interviews, and it's and this course, and it's some meditations, and it's some music, and it's really a beautiful thing. Again, it's a few $100. If you have that kind of resource, then it's a worthy investment. But anyway, this course, in the very first day, in the very first session, Dr. Mate says that trauma creates your worldview. And that was like, whoa, Of course it does. And so that's what happens, right? If you grow up with a level of trauma, and trauma can be in many different forms, right? Like the school system can be traumatizing, right? And trauma, to quote Dr. Mate again, trauma is not the thing that happened to you. Right? Even if you're talking about, physical, even sexual abuse, that was not the thing that caused the trauma. That was traumatizing. Yes, it was horrible to go through that. Yes. But the trauma came after that experience. Specifically, what tools and resources and support were you given to make sense of that experience and to heal from that experience? And so trauma is when somebody's abused and they don't get that support to help them figure it out. And then they just hold that abuse. They just become that abuse. And then that becomes part of their worldview, right? And so, and that's part of the PTSD, NCPTSD of like re-victimization, they call it re-traumatization, right? So like if it was, if somebody was abused by a soccer coach, let's say, right? Then any soccer coach, anytime the word soccer coach comes out, it could even be the picture of a soccer ball, it could be the sound of a whistle. But one of those things is going to take you right back to that point, right? And of course, that is your worldview, right? Like anytime you see something associated with soccer, you're automatically going into an emotional place that is going to impact your behavior. And therefore, it's going to impact everything that happens, right? And so it's really important, and this is part of self-compassion and certainly part of mindfulness, is to be able to see how your worldview is shaped by the experiences you had, most specifically if those experiences involved trauma, right? Or abuse on some level, or violence on some level, or because again, it doesn't have to just be abuse of a single abuse, right? Like it could be, if you're born in Syria, right, you're traumatized because you're born into a war. I mean, that's traumatizing. Now, again, if you have the resources, maybe you can come through that traumatizing experience, healthy and intact. It's a tall order, But again, your worldview is going to be shaped by that experience, right? And so the reason I'm bringing this up, right, is because when we can, and again, this is where self-compassion and mindfulness come in, because when mindfulness allows us to turn towards it, right? It allows us to turn towards the difficult feelings that we have over this and to see it for what it really is. That's really important. All right, because the delusion is something that causes the clinging and the aversion, and that's what causes the negative experience and can, perpetuate something over and over and over and over again. So it's really important to see it for what it really is, that no, I'm not, and this is a realization I came to recently from my own, experience that, I always thought that I was like crazy, and I don't like to use that word, but I mean it with all reverence. Like I thought there was something wrong with my brain because of all of the intrusive thoughts and all of the emotional dysregulation I would have. The affect dysregulation is the clinical term. But I realize that no, it's not because I'm wrong. It's because of the experience I had. It's because of all that happened to me when I was a little kid. And so that's like a little different from a worldview, but not that much. It's a self-view, right? Which is part of the world. It's a part of my world. Thank you very much, right? And so the important thing here is not to discern whether it's worldview or self-view or what that means or whatever. The important thing is to know that it's not me, right? It wasn't something that I created or something that I made happen in some way. It's not something that is wrong with me. It's something that happened to me. And the reason why this is important, okay, is because by acknowledging it this way, by seeing it as something that was part of, this worldview that was imposed upon me through my experiences over which I had no control. But before 8 years old, you have no autonomy, right? And so when I look at it that way, what it allows me to do is one of the most important things that I can possibly do, which is to disidentify. Disidentify with the thoughts, disidentify with the emotions, and disidentify with the behavior that results from those thoughts and emotions. And the reason this is important is because in that disidentification, and this is where self-compassion comes in, right? I can sit here and say, okay, this ragey feeling that you're having right now, it's not you, dude. You're just experiencing an emotion. The way I like to explain this is most of the time we say, I am angry. No, you're not angry. There's no way that the emotion, any single emotion, could hold all that you are. The reality, the more accurate way to describe it is not that you are angry, but that your body is experiencing anger in this moment. That's the accurate way to say it. And when we start saying that, that allows us to be self-compassionate towards ourselves. That allows us to accept that, yeah, wow, I have this really messed up worldview. And now I can change it. Once I accept it, now I can change it. And that harkens back to the last segment, right? And that's what acceptance is all about. It's not about just surrendering for the rest of my life. It's about accepting it for now so that it can be changed for my benefit. So this non-identification is certainly a key aspect of the course that starts on Saturday. Still plenty of time to sign up. There's a link in the description. The payment module is all messed up, so I'm probably going to send out a separate email to everyone just with a payment link. So don't even worry about paying. I think I'm just going to take it out of the thing and just have a sign up, and then I'll deal with the billing after that. But you can certainly sign up. It's only going to take 2 seconds to sign up. So hit the link if you're interested. Well, it'll take you maybe probably about a minute to read the page and all the different information there, and then another few seconds to type in your name and your email. And that's all you got to do. And then again, I'll send a payment thing. And then on Saturday, just meet up with us in the Zoom. All right? All right, everybody. Well, thanks a lot. I have no idea how long this video's gone. Let me see. Let me put on my crooked looking glasses here. 17 minutes. Yeah, I way overdid it today. So I hope you forgive me, and I hope you don't mind. I hope you enjoyed it enough that the time just flew by. All right, everybody. I wish you well, and I will be back again tomorrow. Y'all take care.